Good evening, friends. Today we'll start with our psychology class. So we'll continue with where we left in the last class. We have understood two important steps in a psychological research. There is, after that, the researcher will define hypothesis. Hypothesis is a tentative assumption done by the researcher after going through the literature, after defining the problem. The researcher then defines a question, an assumption which is again precise and falsifiable. When we say falsifiable, it means that it can be either accepted or rejected. Accordingly, the researcher will formulate null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. Null hypothesis states that there is no relation between IV and DV. They are independent. And the alternate hypothesis says that IV-DV can have a relationship. It can be either positive or negative. If the direction is also defined, it is directional hypothesis. If the directional is not defined, it is non-directional hypothesis. This is your null hypothesis. The researcher starts with the null hypothesis, and the approach of the researcher in psychology and many of the scientific disciplines under social science is to ensure that the null hypothesis is rejected. If the null hypothesis gets rejected, then alternate hypothesis comes true naturally. Under the alternate hypothesis, either it can be a positive direction or a negative direction. This much is to be understood, and this is precise. This much is required for your examination. We will solve our previous year question paper. So whatever is not covered, although everything under the syllabus is covered, if there are some issues which are left in the classes, that will be covered under the test for sure. So you will have a holistic preparation. Whatever material I am giving along with the test, all the material should be studied by you again and again. Do your proper revision, and you will definitely pass the exam with flying colors without much effort, as compared to the situation in the market where the material itself is so scattered that students find this very difficult. They are fearful to approach the psychology itself. So after the problem definition step, problem definition has been done, and hypothesis formulation has been done. After these two steps, there is another step, the third step. The third step is your research design. As I have told you, that research design is a skeleton, the plan to conduct the research in an efficient, economic and effective manner. EQ. Economic, efficient and effective manner. A plan. Research design defines that the further steps of sampling and data collection, statistical analysis, interpretation and report writing take place in a systematic, objective and error-free manner. These are all defined by the research design itself. I have also discussed with you that the research design affects not only the further steps, but it also affects the previous steps. That is, it affects the hypothesis formulation and problem definition of the psychological research as well. That is why research design is called the backbone or the cerebral cortex or the mental framework or the, in Hindi if we can say, research design is the Sardar or Mukhya of your psychological research. Research design is the leader of the research. Research design ensures the further steps and the backward steps as well. So research design has to be perfectly planned, a systematic, objective, bias free, error free design. Now we will deal with the research design in an elaborate manner now. RD. What is RD? As the name suggests, it is like RDX. RDX is an explosive thing. So likewise, RD is also very important. It's an explosive thing. It defines the previous steps, it defines the further steps, it defines the complete psychological research. Skeleton, the bone, the physiology and anatomy. It is the skeleton. It is the physiology and anatomy of the research. It is the backbone of the research. It is the cerebral cortex of the research. Everything depends upon research design. The further steps, the previous steps, everything depends on the research design. Now, if we define research design, what is research design? Research design is a plan, is a structure of psychological research which is done or which is made to answer a specific research question. And what is that research question? The hypothesis. A systematic and objective method to address the concerns of hypothesis. Is called research design. A systematic way, a planned way to address the concerns of the research hypothesis. So see how it is happening, how it is unfolding. Firstly, the problem definition is defined, and after the problem definition is defined, then we have research hypothesis. The hypothesis is an objective statement, is a falsifiable, precise, tentative assumption. After the tentative assumption has been reached, now the researcher is looking for a plan to conduct the research so that there is systematic and objective method of sampling and data collection. One thing. Secondly, there is effective control of biases and external variables. there is effective control of biases and external variables. That is the essence of your research design. So research design is giving you a plan, research design is giving you a structure according to which you will either reject or accept the research hypothesis you have already formulated, and to ensure that during the further steps of sampling and data collection there is systematized objective approach, then there is also effective control of biases, errors and external variables. As we have seen, to ensure high internal validity of any research, high internal validity, there are two types of validity. One is your internal and another one is your external validity. To ensure that high internal validity, it is important that the EV, external variable, is effectively controlled. There is a perfect, objective, systematized cause and effect relationship between IV and TV. External validity means that the conclusions which are reached through the research are easily generalizable across various situations in different ecological, environmental context, and with respect to different person, place and time. As we have already seen that the three basic principles, there should be randomization, there should be replication, and there should be local control. Local control is nothing but randomization, replication done for each and every subject, and subject here is the person in psychological research. Randomization says what? That you divide any subject into experimental group or control group randomly without any bias. The subjects don't know in which group they are. The experimenter also does not know in which group they are, double blind. When only the subject does not know in which group they are, single blind. This was asked by UPSC. Not a big deal, but it is made like a rocket science. So simple. You have understood, you can definitely write it. The only idea is to understand, and you will understand. I have full faith in all my students that you will definitely understand if we teachers are able to tell you things in a simplistic manner. That is the approach that MJIS is going to follow, whether it is under my control, ethics, essay or psychology, or for other courses also the supervision, the direction will be mine only. So there also it will be simplification, because the kind of faculties who are going to be here, they are not only eminent, they have world class capability and they simplify each and everything. There is randomization. Replication with respect to person, place, time. The same research conclusions, the same research results, the same research setup is replicated across various situations to ensure that the result we get is universally applicable. And this is the essence of psychological researches, because psychology being a scientific discipline, psychology is not your merely social science. Psychology is quite similar or quite close to naturalistic sciences because of the experimental method, because of the objectivity, the skepticism, accuracy and universalism. So to ensure a universalization, there is replication which is done, so that the results we get are valid everywhere. What is local control? When We ensure that randomization and replication is done for each and every subject. It is local control, nothing else. So, we are here talking about research design. Definition we have got. What is its aim? That also we have understood. The aim is to ensure, the aim of research design is to ensure that the steps which take after research design and the steps which are previous to research design both are done in a systematic and objective manner. 1. Now we'll see the precise aim of research design. What is the precise aim of research design? The first aim of research design is to ensure that cause and effect relationship is established objectively. Not only the cause and effect relationship is established, and between what? IV and DV, independent variable and dependent variable. Independent variable is a variable which is relatively independent from other effects, whose effective manipulation, which is called treatment, done by the researcher, will ensure that there are changes in the dependent variable which can be measured objectively. The researcher also ensures that the external variable which are not the matter of study are controlled effectively. First aim of research design is to ensure that cause and effect relationship is established. What is the second aim? The second aim is, again, nothing. We have already seen it. Generalization and replication of the result. Whatever result we have achieved, that is generalized and replicated. And how it will be possible? If and only if the research design is scientific. We will see, depending upon various contexts, if it is possible, we will always keep the research design as experimental, depending upon the hypothesis. If our hypothesis is to establish a cause and effect relationship, remember, the examiner is very intelligent. Examiner has asked you the question that is it necessary that we start with the hypothesis? No, it's not necessary that we start with the hypothesis. We have seen a grounded theory approach. We start with the data. We don't have any hypothesis, or we are not biased by any particular theory. We don't have any preconceived notion regarding the outcome of the result. We are going with an open mind. You understand this thing? Now, researcher may also ask you that what kind of hypothesis is necessary. Is hypothesis always going to be about IV-DV relationship, cause and effect relationship? The answer is again no. There can be a hypothesis that the IV-DV, as IV increases, DV also increases. They are not looking for cause and effect relationship. And what is this called? Correlational research. Correlational, that is, as one variable changes, the another variable also changes. That is correlational research. If the correlational research, if the hypothesis is regarding the falsifiability of a statement that as the IQ increases, there is certainly an increase or decrease in creativity. If this type of hypothesis is there, then it is correlational research. When the hypothesis says that increase in IQ causes increase in creativity, cause and effect, then it is experimental design, which we will follow. As simple as that. When the hypothesis is regarding descriptive research, that is, the researcher just wants a naturalistic observation, an observation through which the researcher wants to understand how any event like earthquake or tsunami or a volcano eruption affects the mental health of pregnant women in a particular community. So the researcher here wants only to describe. There is no cause and effect relationship establishment in question. There is no correlational research in question. The only question which arises here is description, describing the things. And to describe the things, what the researcher does, just make an observation either as a participant or a non-participant. We have seen the researcher can become a participant in the community or can observe it from outside and then decide what is happening. Just description. So according to the feasibility, according to the hypothesis, according to the feasibility, now I have told you that there is something called economic feasibility also. Then there is something called ethical feasibility. If it is economically, ethically not possible to conduct experimental design, then the researcher will go for something which is called ex post facto. Ex post facto research. What is ex post facto research? The research focuses on post facto scenario. That's why it is called ex post facto. Post facto, an event has already occurred. Now the researcher wants to study its effects. These are in form of quasi-experimental design, where randomization is not possible because the research has already taken place, or correlational research. Either it is in form of quasi-experimental design or correlational research. So we were seeing the aim of research design. 2 points we have seen. One is your establishment of the aim of the research design. Aim of research design is establishment of cause and effect. Secondly, randomize and replicate. Or in place of randomize you can write generalize and replicate. The research conclusions are generalizable. Generalize and replication, generalization and replication of the research conclusion, cause and effect, generalization, replication. The third aim of the research design, as we have been seeing throughout our discussion till now, to test the hypothesis. To test the hypothesis which the researcher starts with, or we can say to test the falsifiability of the problem definition. The falsifiability of the problem definition is hypothesis, because hypothesis is nothing but a falsifiable statement, tentative assumption about the problem definition. Just think about this statement, you will get an insight what I want to convey. And this insight will come only if you are interested in the study of psychology. And you will be interested in the study of psychology. That is the duty of the teachers, to make it simple, not making it so complex that people are afraid to take psychology. Anybody and everybody can take psychology and become a topper if they follow this approach. Now, apart from the fact that a testing of hypothesis is done, cause and effect relationship is established, generalization and first is generalization and replication of the result is done. One more point we have seen, to minimize the biases and external variance, or to minimize the external variable itself, to effectively control the external variable, which will cause external variance. These are all four aims of your research design. Research design is made to ensure, you can start like this, to test the hypothesis, to ensure cause and effect relationship, then to ensure generalization and replication of the results. To ensure generalization and replication of the results, then 4 is to reduce biases and external variance. These 4 are aim of research design. Now we'll come to the types of research design. What are the types of research design? Now here comes the catch. The syllabus says ex post facto, then your experimental design. These two only are mentioned. Generally speaking, there are 3 types of research design. One is your experimental, then there is a correlational and descriptive. What is happening here? Research design types we are seeing. One is your experimental design. Then is your correlational. Then third is your descriptive. What is happening here? Can you tell me by your observation? In the experimental design, there is a cause and effect relationship between IV and DV. In the correlational design, we are not looking forward to IV-DV correlation or IV-DV cause and effect objective establishment of relationship. But we are definitely looking at a covariability of 2 variables, or 2 or more variables rather. Covariability of 2 or more variables under correlational design. When none of these are our objectives, we are neither looking at establishment of cause and effect relationship between 2 variables, nor we are looking at the covariability of two variables, then it is just making observation, and this is called descriptive research design. That is the essence of all the types of research design. Experimental design, what is happening here? IV, DV. What is IV, DV? Independent variable, dependent variable. Cause, this is cause, this is effect. Cause and effect. Establishment of cause and effect relationship between IV and DV is being done, and effective control of minimization of the external variable or external variance, that is ensured. Now, in correlational design, what is happening? Some event has already taken place. Suppose at one place earthquake has already occurred. After the earthquake, it has been found that some people are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Now the researcher wants to study that is there a covariability between the incidence of earthquake and PTSD, the intensity of earthquake and incidence of PTSD. If there is a, if we draw the scatter plots, scatter plot, what is scatter plot? At different places earthquake might have taken place, and the incidence of PTSD in people, this is the earthquake of different intensity. These type of observations are made. When we summarize this plot, this is called regression line. We'll see again in our statistical analysis. This is called regression line or line of best fit. This is also called line of best fit because it summarizes the scatter plot. So as the earthquake intensity increases, there is more and more number of post-traumatic stress disorder incidents happening. So the correlation between earthquake and PTSD is positive correlation. When this type of research are done, it is called correlational research. Suppose the researcher is not interested in this, so the researcher does not want even cause and effect relationship. Researcher is like a party which has got only 5 seats in Lok Sabha polls, but neither the NDA nor the UPA got majority. They all need 5 more seats or 5 more candidates to claim majority of 50%. Now these are your descriptive researchers who are observing the behavior of NDA and UPA both. Likewise, the research done in the descriptive research, they observe the behavior. They are interested in seeing what kind of incidents are happening. That is, in PTSD, what are the gender differences? More women suffering, more men suffering. What are the economic differences? Social differences? Observing it. It may be as a non-participant, observing it from outside, or as a participant. This can be the approach. So all three types of research you have understood. Experimental design is very much clear to you. What is experimental design? When the experimenter divides the subjects, that is, earthquake definitely took place. People are suffering from PTSD. But now researcher wants to study the effect of a new type of intervention which will make betterment of psychological well-being, or mental health will get better if we introduce this to the subjects. So there are 1,000 people in the village. The researcher divides them in two groups. One is your experimental group, one is your control group. In the experimental group, the researcher introduces, and this is done randomly. The division is random. And the best way to do the random division is to find a pair for each and everybody and then dividing it in two halves. Here the experimental group, the treatment is brought. New cognitive method of intervention. New cognitive therapy. Suppose we give it a name of new cognitive therapy. Not Beck's cognitive therapy, but new cognitive therapy. New cognitive therapy is introduced in the experimental group. No therapy is introduced in the control group. Then after some time, the researcher sees the psychological well-being of experimental group and control group, finds that the psychological well-being of the experimental group participants is much better than the control group participants' psychological well-being, reaches to the conclusion that the new method, new cognitive therapy has a huge role to play in the betterment of psychological well-being. Cause and effect relationship has been established as objectively as possible. All other variables which could have affected this study like gender, caste, creed, religion, they all have been randomized. Apart from that, one particular variable where the researcher thinks could have been a major effect or major reason to bring discrepancy in our results is IQ. This researcher takes as external variable. And a researcher does what? Researcher divides the groups, experimental and control group, so that their mean IQ is same. So that IQ does not become a factor to affect the results, the existing IQ of the people. That is called effective control of EV, external variable. There are many other variables which may have affected the result of experimental research. These are called confounding variables, छिपे हुए variables. These confounding variables may also have affected the research outcome, but since the researcher, the experimenter, has divided the group in a randomized manner, these confounding variables don't affect the research. They don't affect the research. Researcher has tried the level best to eliminate the effect of confounding variable because of randomization and deliberately control the EV, which could have affected the research, but that is a variable which the researcher has kept separate and countering it effectively. Apart from the general randomization which the researcher does, this is a specific randomization, and that's why it is called EV, external variable. So manipulation of IV is done by introducing this new cognitive therapy. That's called manipulation of IV, or also called treatment. No treatment in the control group, treatment in the experimental group. The effect of psychological well-being is seen, the incidence of psychological well-being in experimental and control group, and the results are summarized. This is called your experimental design. What will happen in quasi-experimental design? QED, no randomization takes place. Since no randomization takes place, we cannot reach to IVDV cause and effect relationship objectively. The control of EV is also not effective because randomization is not there. It is not effectively controlled. That's why the results we get from QED, quasi-experimental design, is not as objective as with the experimental design. But due to financial, ethical, and other constraints, most of the researchers either go for QED or NED, non-experimental design, where neither IV manipulation nor EV control is done. IVDV cause and effect relationship is definitely not established. So this research is largely descriptive in nature. It describes but cannot reach any prescriptive or causal relationship. This summarizes everything as far as ED, QED, NED is concerned. Now, since it is mentioned in the syllabus, we will study about ex post facto research or ex post facto design. What is ex post facto design? As the name suggests, the study is being done after the incident has already taken place, under which will come your quasi-experimental design or your correlational design. They both are ex post facto because the fact has already occurred, and whatever we are studying is after the fact has occurred. Ex post facto. Post facto. So it's that simple. We have understood what is happening here. In quasi-experimental design, randomization cannot be done. No randomization. Because we don't have the liberty to find our experimental and control group. We cannot divide whether it is experimental group or control group. That is defined because of the incident. Earthquake took place, people are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. What could be the study? Either we can describe what is happening in the PTSD, we can do this. This is descriptive type of research. Case study method, survey method, observation method that can be done. Or since randomization cannot be done, we can see that introduction of in the QED, as we did for the experimental design. What we did, we introduced new cognitive therapy. So under the QED, if we have to do the same kind of research, what we will do, we take the within subject pre-test, post-test design, which we have studied earlier. Within subject. within the subject. So same set of people, same subjects. Suppose there are 100 people, 100 subjects. They are suffering from PTSD. Their situation before introduction of new cognitive therapy is judged. After introduction of new cognitive therapy, their situation is assessed. Within subject, same subjects, all subjects here. Ram Babu, Shyam Babu, Kam Babu, Tam Babu, all are here. We'll see the effect of new cognitive therapy on Ram Babu, Shyam Babu, everybody in this group. Compare their effect, situation before the introduction of NCT, new cognitive therapy, and situation after the introduction of new cognitive therapy. Pre-test, this is post-test. Within subject. And what have we introduced? New cognitive therapy here. Same person, the effect before the introduction of new cognitive therapy, the effect after the introduction of new cognitive therapy, it will be done. We'll see the comparison and we'll come to the conclusion that the effect of new cognitive therapy is post-test minus pre-test. That's it. That will give us the effect of new cognitive therapy. As simple as that. What are we following here? Quasi-experimental design. We don't have the liberty to do the randomization. We don't have the liberty to assess the IV-DV cause and effect relationship in an objective manner, but we can certainly see the effect of treatment by measuring the situation of subjects after the introduction of treatment and comparing it with the situation of the subjects before the introduction of the treatment. Post-test minus pre-test will give you the effect of treatment. Simple. Quasi-experimental design. This is also called ex post facto design. Under the ex post facto design, another thing comes that is called your correlation. That's also ex post facto. Why ex post facto? Because things have already occurred. We are not manipulating anything. IV manipulation is not under the control of the researcher here also. We are just seeing the covariability. You see, what is important here is covariability of two variables. That's what is our study. Correlation. These two are part of your ex post facto design. And what is the experimental design we have already seen? This is the basic effect, the basic difference. Now, what is important is how to choose the best research design. How to choose the best research design? How will we choose it? See, as we have seen, research design is nothing but a systematic plan to test the hypothesis, to reach to the conclusion, cause and effect relationship objectively, minimizing the biases and external variance, to ensure that our results are generalizable, universal, which can be replicated. That's the main essence of research design. But how to choose which research design, like whether it is experimental design, quasi-experimental design, non-experimental design, a descriptive type of research, where we are just observing it, not running after the cause and effect relationship, not running after the covariability. How to choose the research design which suits the psychological research at hand, which suits our hypothesis? How to define that? The answer lies in the statement itself. One thing which defines the research design is the hypothesis itself. The kind of hypothesis. If the hypothesis itself is a question about the cause and effect relationship, like increase in IQ causes increase in creativity. So there is the subject matter is there is a cause and effect relationship between IQ and creativity. So if the hypothesis is like this, we are going towards which type of research design? Experimental research design. It will be experimental design. If the hypothesis itself is, what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is IQ and creativity co-vary or not co-vary. If this is our question, then what type of research design will reach to? Correlation. Correlational. Then, apart from the hypothesis, what else decides our research design? As I have already told you, the feasibility, and ethicality. Not every research can be done, not every question can be solved in an experimental manner. We cannot see the effect of a deformed brain structure due to an accident. We cannot break somebody's skull by taking a bottle of wine. We break somebody's skull and see the effect on his cognitive functioning. Is it advisable? Is it ethical? The answer is no. When the earthquake has already taken place, we cannot see the effect of earthquake. We cannot conduct an artificial earthquake because it may have ill effects on the physical and mental health of the person. So we will have to see the feasibility and ethicality. According to that, we define whether it is experimental design, quasi-experimental design, or just a descriptive research. Then, before deciding about the particular research design, the researcher also sees the internal and external validity of research design. If you look at the experimental design, what's happening here? We are establishing an IVDV, cause and effect relationship, objectively. External variable is controlled effectively. So if you look at the internal validity, of this research, it will be very high. But if you look at the external validity of experimental design, external validity, it will be very low. You know why? Because the conclusions reached in a lab setting, in an experimental setting, in a controlled situation cannot be generalized, universalized, randomized, replicated in a real world situation. So the external validity is very low. Internal validity is very high. If you look at the non-experimental design, quasi-experimental design, especially the non-experimental design, which is sort of descriptive research, its internal validity is 0 because we are not conducting any experiment. But if you look at the experimental validity, the external validity of non-experimental design, which is descriptive in nature, it is very high because whatever we have observed, it is naturalistic. You see this. Every year, many new companies, car manufacturing companies, come into the market. They do their analysis, accident analysis, how safe is the car. By the way, the safest car in the world is made by Volvo. They make the safest car. However, Audi and BMW and Range Rover may claim, but the safest cars as far as accidents are concerned are done by Volvo. So they conduct experiment to see the robustness, the strength of the car in an experimental setup in the lab. They crash the car into a truck in an artificial setting. But what happens on the road is that it cannot happen in that artificial setting. The car is going this way, the truck is moving in the opposite direction. Suddenly, the truck driver, because of the influence of the alcohol or because of the lack of sleep, may crash onto the car. Then, what about your validity of this experiment which we have done? So, the external validity of such experiments is very, very low, which is done in the lab. But if you look at the internal validity, yes, everything is under control. We can reach to, yes, these are the factors due to which we try to reach to the safest way, but it may or may not be safe. External validity. Internal validity, in the lab setting, whatever is done has high internal validity. So according to the ethical constraints, according to the feasibility of the situation, the internal or external validity, and then the hypothesis which we have at hand, we define our research design. This is the essence of the research design topic. Few more things. We need to see in this particular chapter itself, which will be part of your data collection methods, sampling especially. So we'll see sampling, day after tomorrow. Data collection also not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, Friday. Friday we'll have a longer class, and we'll see this sampling data collection. Then we'll take one more class to wrap up our understanding of statistics, or two or three more classes. So by the end of next week we'll be done with this chapter. We'll take few more classes to finish our chapter 1 of paper 2. Then we'll conduct the test. After that, during December, we'll conduct more classes in a week, and we'll finish the whole of the syllabus, paper 1 and 2, effectively. Thank you very much for joining. Good night.